Let's begin by making the collar of the top. The collar is designed symmetrically on both sides. Next, we sew the two identical pieces of fabric together with the right sides facing each other. Once sewn, cut it out. When you reach the pointed corner of the collar, you can add a stitch. It helps to make it look better after we flip it over. Friends who don't know how to thread can check out a separate tutorial video in the folder. When we officially start working, we can cut it open from the middle, like this. This makes it easier for us to thread later. This section with a smaller curve is not stitched. Then we extend the starting and ending points outward by a 5mm margin. Insert a line at the sharp corner of the vehicle. Then we continue measuring forward. After we finish measuring, let's take a look. This position with a smaller curvature has no stitching. Then we leave a 5mm seam allowance at this position to cut it. For the remaining areas, you can use pinking shears. If you don't have pinking shears, just use regular scissors. At the curved areas, make more notches. After trimming, we turn it to the front side and press it with an iron. Sisters who want to sew a decorative stitch can do it on their own. If you don't want to sew a decorative stitch, you can just iron it flat. Next, let's work on the sleeve section. I left a 7mm seam allowance at this position on the bottom edge. Here I folded it inward and then created a 5mm fold line, so at least leave a 7mm gap. If the line you are folding is narrower, then you don't need to leave as much. Then we will fold both sleeves in half. Locate the center point on the reverse side and make a mark. After marking, set the two sleeves aside for later use. Here I'm using the front and back pieces of both the outer fabric and the lining. They are all made of the same high-quality cotton, featuring 60 threads per inch. First, position the front and back pieces of the outer fabric together with the right sides facing. Sew at the tip of the seam. Repeat the steps. Ensure that the front and back pieces of the lining are facing each other. Sew the location of the pointed seams. Once each is sewn together, we will unfold the front and back pieces. This style of sharp seams opens up to both sides. We have two methods to address the internal contour position. One method is hand sewing. One method is to use fusible interfacing to flip it over. If you'd like to use fusible interfacing, you can proceed with this step directly. There are separate files in the tutorial folder. The two methods for contouring in that section. Feel free to take a look, everyone. Just choose whichever one you like. This side is because I am making a sample garment. I haven't specifically worked on this part. Next, we will take this front piece of the outer layer. Fold it like this. Find the center point of the neck opening of the front piece. Make a mark, make it on the front side of the fabric. This position behind us also has marking points. You can check it on the drawing. Mark the position of this marker point. Also mark it when putting on the collar. The back of the collar aligns. This marker point at the back. The front aligns with this marker point in the middle. On the collar, at the front of this section, at this moment, the front of our collar is also facing upward when the express train arrives at its destination. Let's use the other collar. Make sure to align it properly. Ensure there is no gap between the two collars. Next, take out the lining we prepared earlier. The lining should be facing the outer fabric. Sewing around the collar. While sewing, we place the outer fabric on top. We follow the seam we just stitched on the top. Just measure it again. The style of this collar, trim it yourself with decorative scissors. I don't have lace scissors. Just use ordinary scissors to make some snips. After trimming, we need to put on this sleeve. If we're talking about putting on the sleeve, it's placed on top of this part of the table. Make your own distinction. When putting on the sleeve, we have marked the center point here in front. This mark will be used later. It needs to align with the shoulder seam position. The sleeve is opposite the front side of the garment. This curvature of the sleeve, the curvature of this armhole is different from ours, so we need to sew while adjusting it, its position. Furthermore, when we are sewing, the fabric underneath, I can pull it slightly towards my side. Pull it some because of the fabric on top. We need to sew while adjusting its curvature. It can easily cause issues with the fabric above. It has stretched slightly, so when you sew to the end like this, it can easily affect the fabric of the sleeve above. It has lengthened a little, so when we sew, we can stretch the fabric underneath a little bit. This way it will align. Once we finish sewing, we use the same method. Sew the other side of this sleeve. Sew it up as well. After both sleeves are gathered, we will place the lining with the right sides together. Sew it together. This position at the side seam under the armhole. The other side, the position of the side seam under the armhole. Also sewn in the same way. Next, we will take the front part. The front and back pieces are facing each other. Sew the side seams, and this part of the sleeve. The other side is sewn in the same way. After both sides are sewn, we are on both sides. In this style, at the underarm area, make a few cuts on it, then we will take care of the back sides. The position of the opening, the lining and the outer part are facing each other. Just do it like this. Sew down along the seam line. The top corner position, let's trim it at an angle like this. Its unique style, let's continue sewing this hem. When we are sewing this hem, it also includes the lining and the outer fabric, facing each other directly. The vehicle should be positioned at the designated style area. This style, here, let's first handle the skirt section. The skirt is made according to the dimensions specified in the drawing. Then, add a 5mm seam allowance on all sides and cut it out. Next, we take out the pattern for the front section of the upper part. First, fold the skirt in half. Find the position of its midline. You don't have to make a mark. Then you'll know where its midline is. Just fold it a bit. I'm saying this for everyone's understanding. I drew the center line position with a line. All the sewing lines here. We need to draw on the front side of the fabric. Then we measure the upper part, the distance between the two lines in the middle. For example, I measured 2 centimeters here. Dividing this 2 centimeters by 2 is equal to 1 centimeter, right? So we are at this middle line. Draw a line 1 centimeter to the right. Also draw a line 1 centimeter to the left. Actually, it just means to position these two lines. Draw it directly in the center of our skirt hem. The middle line is unnecessary. The middle line simply indicates, I mentioned it for everyone's understanding, I just drew it on. Mainly, it's these two lines on both sides. I have now finished drawing these two lines. These are the two lines at the top. Then we will conclude with these two lines. Draw lines to both sides of it. What is the width of the line area? It's all written on our drawings. For example, my drawing specifies 7 millimeters. So we will draw to both sides of it. Draw a line every 7 millimeters, like in the video. Just fill both sides completely. It's okay if there are 1 or 2 lines missing at the edge, because there is already a reserved section. This is what we will cut off later. The 2 lines in the center. These are the 2 lines we initially drew. We shouldn't touch these 2 lines. We will use the 2 lines adjacent to it. I will draw a circle around these 2 lines. Fold these 2 lines slightly. Fold it towards the back. The side facing up is the front. Then use this circular line as a guide. Every 2 lines, we will fold it again, until we have folded the entire strip. Fold once every 2 lines. The same goes for the other side. It's folded once for every 2 lines. When we fold it this way to the back side. You just need to fold it like this. Because I use hot skin removal, so I scraped it with my nails. If you peel it with water, you can directly use an iron to press it. Every 2 lines, we repeat the folding process once. This is how it looks once everything is folded. Next, we begin folding from the center towards both sides. While folding, we take the line we just folded as our first line. Then align it with the third line like this. Move 1 or 2 millimeters to the right along the guideline. Temporarily secure it. Repeat this step continuously. Fold this piece properly on one side. While fixing the fold in place, we need to make several folds here in total. It's also noted in my blueprint. Everyone take a look. I've already finished the folds on the right side this time. Let's count the folds. This way, you can create one by pinching it together. That counts as a fold. For example, the 9 indicated on the blueprint. Then you would be folding 9. If you write 8, you fold 8. Follow exactly what is on your drawing. Then we will fold these folds on the left side. You need to pay attention. The direction here is to the left. Just now, the direction we were facing was to the right. It's this fold on both sides. It's direction. The guiding direction is towards both sides. It is opposite. We use the same method. Secure all these folds. The number of folds on both sides is identical. After everything is folded, we organize it, and this is how it appears. Then we'll set this part aside for now. Here, we'll work on the chest decoration band, based on the dimensions provided in the drawing. We'll cut out this strip directly. There's no need to add any additional home-style elements. First, fold it in half. Once this crease is folded, we will use this crease as a reference on both sides. Fold it inward once more. Actually, this is just like folding the edge of a package. It's just that this size will be slightly narrower. After folding it properly, we will fold it in half once more at the end. Then at this opening, secure the side seam. Then it forms a small strip like this. This part will be set aside for now. This is the decorative strip for the front doormat. We are going to incorporate some style. After tracing this design from the blueprint, let's also add a style to the 4 edges. Next, we will apply this style to both long edges. Fold it inward towards the opposite side like this. Fold both sides inward towards the opposite side. You can use an iron to make it smooth. Iron it and set it aside for now. Pay attention to this part first. This is the front piece of our fabric. There are 2 lines on this side. We need to draw these 2 lines on the front side of our fabric. I have drawn on the reverse side in front of me. Let's trace it again on this front side. This makes it easier for alignment later. Then we will position the front and back pieces of the watch face opposite each other, sewing the position of the corner seams. After removing, we will unfold the front and back pieces. Separate the sharp seam towards both sides. You can either scrape with your nails or use an iron to press it. Then take out the inner front and back pieces. Similarly, the front sides are sewn together at the sharp seam. Separate the design at the pointed seam position to both sides. Let's take a look here. This refers to the neckline position on the front piece. Regarding the drawing, this horizontal bar can be cut off. This is just a reference position for the chest decoration strap. After trimming, we will align the drawing and the fabric together. We need to mark this position of the chest decoration strap. On our fabric, we will trace it out. Then take out the decorative strip for the chest that we made earlier. Its front side should be aligned with the front side of the fabric underneath, just like shown in the video. Secure it temporarily on one side first. Then take out the skirt, for which we have already prepared the pleats. The 2 lines at the bottom and the 2 lines above need to be aligned. First, we need to take this middle section. Sew it together with the right sides facing each other. It's roughly at the center of this adjacent section. Next is the center position of this side section. You just need to focus on the section that indicates the center of these 2 markers on the car. When sewing, make sure to align the front sides. Next, pay attention to these 2 lines. The upper and lower lines must be aligned. After sewing, we flip it over to check the front first. Check if the positions of these 2 lines are aligned. If they're aligned, that's fine. Then take out this decorative strip for our front door trim. Position it directly with the middle part of these 2 lines. Its length will be slightly longer than the lower part. This part is reserved. Just trim it off later. After aligning with the edges of the two lines below, we directly sew the two side edges to secure it. As for when we are sewing at this moment, the hem of the skirt and the upper part. The seam at the waist is oriented towards the neckline. The section at the very bottom edge, we will trim it along the edge of the skirt. Then next, we will handle the bottom edge of the skirt. Follow this to fold the seam line and tuck the edge. I measured a 1mm line here. If you like it a bit wider, you can also measure it wider. It's up to your personal preference. After measuring, the pleat at the hem of our skirt will be quite messy. Those who use a hot pen can do it just like I do. First, scrape it lightly with your nails to restore its original appearance. Those who use a water pen can directly steam iron it. Restore the pleat. This is how it looks after being organized. Then, take out our lining. The positions of the lining and the outer collar are facing each other. We need to sew a section of the collar and a section of the embroidery frame on each side. When driving, we should keep the dashboard facing upwards. When driving, we must be aware of an issue. Specifically, regarding one side of the vehicle. It does not have a fixed decorative strap on the front. Isn't that right? This position we have about 1 centimeter empty. Do not measure the seam. But if the area around your chest is not sewn with a visible line, then you can skip this step, because this purpose is mainly for convenience. Let's leave an opening here for a moment. Finally, take this decorative strap on the chest. Insert the other end in. This way, the style of the chest decorative strap is maintained. It is completely hidden. It is invisible. However, this is based on your need to fix the line in the end. Only then can you use this method. If you don't fix the line at the end, you just want to flatten it. You shouldn't use this method. If you don't sew the clear line. After we skip this step, we just wait until the end. Then attach the other end of the chest decoration strap. Place it in this location on the back. You will definitely see the style. However, if this style is on the back, it does not significantly affect the aesthetics of the front. If you want it to be more visually appealing, you should leave a gap like I do. In the end, just secure the outlining line. Just leave some space above this position. Leave some space below. This way we can wait for a moment, it will be easier to insert it. Then let's continue driving. When we reach this position, we'll skip over this small segment. Then we drive forward again. The car goes to the other side. When the decorative strap secures this position, we can just drive it over. You don't need to worry about this. Then adjust the embroidery frame positions on both sides. Also sew it down to secure it. Like when I was sewing the embroidery frame here. There is a decorative strap on this side. The end of this needs to be tucked in. Do not sew the decorative strap part. Trim the lace on both sides of the embroidery frame. If you don't have lace scissors, then use regular scissors. Add some snaps on the peak, the collar area. I also did a little trimming on it. However, do take care. It's this one we have. The part that had the decorative ribbon earlier. Do not trim it. Avoid this strap, as it may easily get pulled apart later. There's also the other side. If there's a gap like I have, don't trim this part either, or just the neckline. You don't need to use all the clips. We only need to place them at these turning points, at the curved areas. Just use some clips individually. Finally, we will pass through this channel from the front piece's shoulder. Stretch the blood money this way. Hold this thick piece of fabric at the back. Pull it forward like this and turn it over. When we're clamping the fabric, it's best to clamp the inner fabric. This way the surface won't wrinkle easily. The other side is the same. Flip it over. After flipping it over, let's take a look at the decorative ribbon. Because there's an opening at the front, in a moment we will insert this end, insert it from the opening. Then just secure the wire in place. This way it cannot be seen from either side. The stitching of this bag will be a bit more aesthetically pleasing, but if you don't use a clear stitch, you shouldn't leave a button. Finally, this end of the bag before, we put it underneath. Just hand sew it to secure it. Then sew the button decoration on the front. Next, we'll work on the collar, and this area for adjusting the fit. The areas we just stitched are all ironed flat. After ironing, it looks like this. Then we will now align the side seams of the front and back pieces. Spread them out like this and put them together. At the right moment, set the skirt aside. No need to worry about the skirt section. The inner parts should face each other. The outer parts should face each other. Sew directly along the wind line. The other side is processed using the same method. After the test is completed, we will sew these two positions, spread them apart to both sides. Then we will join the inside and the outside. Combine it like this. This circle of the repaired framework is closed. On the other side, this part of the framework is repaired. It is also closed the same way. Then we proceed to handle it. This part of the skirt. The waistband of the skirt we just discussed. Just this middle section of the skirt. Now we connect to what we just discussed. The positions on both sides of this middle section. Fill in the remaining part for it. Also, when we are in this part of the car, because there is a segment in the middle, it is secured in place. Therefore, the starting position. You may not be very good at driving. If it's a good car, you can just drive it. If you think it's not a good car, you place this at the seam, make a couple of small cuts. After flipping it over like this, it will be easier to handle. It will be more even. And we have reserved parts for the swing. Excess material from the upper half, this edge's position, we can just cut it off. Then use the same method again. Also, ensure the skirt board on the other side is finished properly. Trim away the excess parts. Then let's do some stitching. This area at the waist. So when we stitch this area, the middle section will not be stitched. When sewing the fabric, the stitches underneath are towards the collar. We are at the midpoint of sewing. We need to stop and backstitch after the first stitch. Don't overdo the backstitching to prevent excessive accumulation here. Just the right amount will do. Then cleanly trim the excess threads. Here we discuss how we typically make clothes. We often encounter specific parts. These parts have corners. So how do we handle the corners in these parts to achieve a good appearance after flipping it over? It looks a bit more aesthetically pleasing. The shape of this angle is like this. It doesn't have to be a right angle. It might also be an acute angle, or it may be an obtuse angle. Let me roughly sketch this out. When we usually encounter this kind of position, its angles might vary. However, we can all use the same method to operate on it a bit. Then turn it over. Prepare a sewing thread. This is an ordinary sewing machine. The thread we usually use, the color of this thread. My personal suggestion is to choose a color that contrasts greatly with the fabric. For instance, I'm using white fabric here, so you should avoid using white thread, because it's easy to get confused when you flip it over. You might think this is the end of the thread. You can either tear it off or cut it. Then when we officially begin stitching, you're about to get to this corner. Stop at the stitch just before it. After you stop, we open the two pieces of fabric. The thread is placed in the middle. Both hands pull the ends of the thread tight and back. At this moment, our needle is embedded in the fabric, so our thread will be caught by the needle. In this state, let's take another step forward. You must place the needle precisely at this pinpoint location. If there are some sisters you are not sure about, just right. This injection reaches this point. Then, lift the pressure angle manually. Adjust the hand wheel. Position it for the last stitch. It should land precisely on this point. At this point, our needle is still embedded in the fabric. Then we pull tight both ends of the thread at the same time. Give it a little pull outward. If we did it correctly, then the thread should be behind the needle. It was initially in front. Now it's at the back. If you pull it out like this, you pulled it out directly. This indicates there's a problem with your operation. Next, we tightly pinch both ends of the line. Hide it to the left at the back. Then when we sew later, we can't step on this thread, so you need to determine where to hide it. Then turn this fabric. Continue sewing up the remaining parts. Finally, we need to trim the seams of the seat. The seat seam at the right angle. Give the shoes a little trim. Pay attention while trimming. This right angle has a line attached to it. We must be careful when cutting. Do not cut this line. If there are indeed no issues, we can flip it over. Be careful when flipping it over. We need to simultaneously pull both ends of the line tight. Pull it outward. Pull this right angle out. You must not just pull one end of the line. If you only pull one end of the line, this line can be easily pulled out by you. It must be pulled from both ends simultaneously. In the end, we will remove this line. It's just about pulling one end. You can pull this thread out. Here, we will cut out the image of this badge. Then draw it on this leather. Then just cut it into the exact same shape. This is the kind of leather I am using. This position at the front needs to be hollowed out. You can use a utility knife or something to cut it open. Then I drew several small squares for badges like this. What is written on top is something like this. And the bottom part is left blank. This is for writing your own carved name. Then we apply glue. Flip this leather over. Fill this solid part. Fill the area of this small square. Center this label on the badge. Then apply the glue to the hollowed out part on top. Also apply glue to the edges. Don't apply too much, as it can overflow easily. Then the glue may become cloudy. Then press these two parts together like this. After pinching it well, we position it at this middle spot. You can create a mushroom cube. Those who don't know how to make mushroom cubes can take a look. We have compiled a folder that contains a separate video. Finally, let's discuss how to secure the name tag. Here, I used a bit of eyelid glue. Simply attach it like this on the back, and then just stick it onto the clothing. Or, when we applied the glue just now, you can also put it behind this paper. It means placing a magnet behind the central label. It's a type of magnet that is thinner. Place a magnet inside the garment as well. Just turn it into a magnetic attraction mechanism. Alternatively, we can sew directly onto the fabric. In any case, there are plenty of methods. Everyone can choose whatever they prefer. Use this awl to make holes in the fabric. Polish the fixed base to insert it from the back. Then put the lid on. Gently press to secure. This attachment is unstable. Just gently make a small secure. We also need to tap it with this mold. If you don't have a mold, then you can gently tap with a hammer. You just need to tap it once. If you have a mold, try to use it. It's less likely to deform. Don't hit too hard when tapping. Tap gently. Feel the button snap into place. It should feel slightly